With populations of monarch butterflies being threatened, we all want to do our part to save this species. And one of the best ways to do that is to plant their host plant, milkweed, which there are several different varieties of milkweed. But should you be planting a variety commonly known as honeyvine milkweed in your garden? My story with honeyvine milkweed is that I've seen it coming up around my garden in many different areas, and it's this long vining plant with these heart-shaped leaves on it, and everywhere it comes up around a plant, it seems to just twirl its way up, lay over that plant, and kind of take over an area. And I'd been told by several people that it's an aggressive, terrible weed that you do not want in your garden. So I'd been pulling it out at the base of the plant, and where the base of the plant is attached at the ground, it actually has a woodier stem underneath the ground. It's really difficult to pull it out with any of that woody stem. It breaks off really easily here at the base. So I'd been pulling out what I thought was just this noxious weed that was going to take over my garden. I tried mulching areas, but it kind of laughed at my mulch, and it treated that as a nice little blanket that it could survive underneath and then push its way back up through once a cold winter subsided. And I thought, this is just a terrible weed that has no benefits that I'm just going to have to deal with in my garden. But imagine my surprise when I decided to actually look up what I was pulling out of the ground, and I found it is a host plant for the caterpillar, which becomes the monarch butterfly. And I was really conflicted. I thought, now what do I do about this weed that wants to lay over all my plants and twine around them and just create a big mess of a vine in my garden? A plant that then creates these massive seed pods that have tons of little seeds in them that can spread all over your garden. Once you have this in any space, you're not going to eradicate it. Those woody stems where the base of the honeyvine milkweed is attached, they can go down anywhere around 6 feet, and they're going to be all over your soil. I continued my research, and I found that not only is this a host plant for the caterpillar of the monarch butterfly, but it's actually native to many states in the United States, including my state of Ohio, which was incredibly surprising because I thought for sure this is some crazy invasive weed that was brought here and it's just taken over spaces where it shouldn't be. But no, it's actually great for butterflies and a lot of other pollinators which love the flowers that it creates. But does that mean you should intentionally plant it, and should you keep it in a space where you see it coming up? If you decide to keep it in a space where it's coming up, I assure you it's going to try to dominate that space. It's extremely aggressive, can take over a space. It can cause skin irritation, doesn't cause any of that for me. It could cause eye irritation, so I make sure to wash my hands thoroughly after I touch it, and ideally, if you're handling this, it might be a good idea to wear gloves. But should you plant it in a space? I would say no, I would not intentionally plant this in a space, even though it's good for the monarch butterfly. I'll tell you why. I'm all for saving the monarch butterfly, but I think there are better options to intentionally plant in a space. There are so many different varieties of milkweed, and two of the better ones for monarchs are the common milkweed and the swamp milkweed. From what I've read, the swamp milkweed does about the best job of attracting monarch butterflies. This honeyvine milkweed does not do as good of a job at attracting the monarch butterflies as those other milkweeds, the common and the swamp milkweed. So those other varieties would be much better to intentionally plant in your garden space because they're not going to take over like this one. I have heard the common milkweed can be a little bit aggressive, but the swamp milkweed is not as aggressive, and it actually does one of the best jobs at creating a great host environment where the monarch butterflies can lay their eggs that then will become the caterpillars and reproduce into more monarch butterflies. Definitely don't think you should be intentionally planting this in a space. It spreads wildly and easily, and I assure you it'll probably come up in your space before you do anything intentional about it. Now that the sun has come out, I just wanted to add, I think the biggest reason you should not plant this honeyvine milkweed is your neighbors are going to hate you, and they're going to hate this plant when it spreads into their gardens, inevitably when those seeds are dispersed, and you don't want your neighbors and other people to hate the efforts of encouraging the monarch butterfly populations. You want people to be encouraged and to be involved and to plant things that they love, that monarchs love, and there are better options that monarchs love more than this aggressive honeyvine milkweed, such as the swamp milkweed. It's a very beautiful plant. It adds a lot of appeal to people's gardens, and it's something that everyone can get on board with to help encourage an increase in monarch populations. But then, should you leave it in a space where it already exists? And this I'm kind of conflicted on. I think if you have an area area that's kind of wild and native, go ahead and let this honey vine exist, as it does provide benefit to monarchs and pollinators. But if you leave it in a space, it's gonna cover a bunch of the plants that are in this space, create a dense mat of foliage and vines, and it's gonna be really hard for those other plants in your space to compete. I'm thinking about devoting a very small area where I could allow it to exist, but then once I see those big seed pods develop, I would harvest all those and make sure those don't spread more seeds throughout my area. So it's something that if you're going to allow it to exist, you're probably going to have to manage it if you don't want it to spread like crazy. It can spread underground, so you kind of have to be okay with that possibility if you're allowing it to exist in any space. I'm also toying with the thought of just trying to eradicate it as much as possible. Pull it up wherever I see it, pull up the underground woodier stems, and then replacing it with the better kinds of milkweed, the swamp milkweed, the common milkweed that can exist in my garden and attract monarchs without being super aggressive and shading out all my other plants. Because if I'm getting rid of something that monarchs like, I feel a lot better replacing it with something they like even better. So those are my thoughts on honeyvine milkweed. If you've ever had experience with it, you might hate it, but you may not know it actually can benefit butterflies and pollinators. So let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.